With night portrait pictures, the idea is to use the flash in order to brighten your subject, the person in the picture, but leave the shutter open long enough to also properly expose for the background light. So the way to do this, you can do this a couple different ways with the camera. One way, very simple, turn your mode dial to SCN, this is the scene mode, and this will allow you to profile the camera for night portraits. You can use your dial here to change the mode, and here's night scene, and this is exactly what I want. You have two options, night scene and night snapshot. I would recommend going with night scene if you have a tripod, but if you don't have a tripod and you need to hand hold the picture, go ahead and use night snapshot. That would be this one right here. Night snapshot is going to try and get you a faster shutter speed by increasing the ISO, but it still may not be fast enough to hand hold. So I would highly recommend using a tripod in these situations. I'm going to turn mine to night scene. And as you can see, currently my flash is turned to auto. In this case, because we are at night and it's outdoors, more than likely the flash will be used. But to guarantee that, I would recommend setting this to the flash on mode by pressing the flash button here and move over to flash on. Go ahead and press set. The ISO is set to automatic. There's no way of changing this. The white balance is also set to automatic, and this too can't be changed, which may or may not cause problems. The flash may turn out okay, but the city lights in the background will probably turn out yellow. And there's not a whole lot you can really do about that, even if you had control over the white balance, because the flash is a very blue light and the city lights are very, very yellowish. They're more tungsten-based lights. In this case, what you would do now is just go ahead and press the shutter button halfway, lock the focus on your subject. If you can't lock focus, because there is very, very little light, even though you have the autofocus assist beam activated and everything should work out fine, you still may not be able to lock focus. You may want to use the manual focus. I'll show you how to do that in a second. Press the shutter button halfway. Once the focusing square has turned green, the focus has been locked, and you can go ahead and recompose the image any way you want and press the shutter button the rest of the way to take the picture. If you can't find a focus point, because again it is very, very low light, I would recommend using the manual focus. Press the MF button right here to access the manual focus. Go ahead and use your dial to move this to approximately what you feel the distance is between the camera and the subject. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and set this to about 2 meters. I'm going to place myself roughly 2 meters from the subject in order to have that focus be as accurate as possible. Once that's set, press the shutter button halfway, recompose the image, and go ahead and press the shutter button the rest of the way to take the picture. You can see my ISO is set to 80 and my flash is forced on, which is exactly what I want. Because this mode automates a lot of the camera's features, such as ISO and white balance, I prefer not using this mode. Instead of using this mode, what I would recommend doing is turn your mode dial back to P. The program mode is indicated with the P, and this is what we normally use, so you really don't need to go into the scene mode and hunt around for the proper scene. You just leave it on P. Our ISO is set to 80. Exposure compensation is set to 0. In the back, I want to force the flash, so I'll press the flash button right here to access that flash setting and use the dial to move around until I get to flash on. Press set. My ISO again is set to 80. My white balance is set to tungsten. This is great for the city lights in the background, but not so great for the subject. So I'm going to want to change this. Press the shortcut button or the function button to access ISO. And I'm going to turn this to flash because I am using the flash and I don't want my subject to come out very blue. Had I stayed on tungsten, the city lights in the background would come out great, but my subject would probably come out a little bit blue because the flash is a very blue light. So I'll press set to accept that. The other thing with the flash, again, because I am relatively close to my subject, and this is really dependent on how close you are to your subject, you may want to decrease the flash exposure compensation. And you do that by pressing the function button, go down to flash exposure compensation right here. Currently mine is set to -2, but that may be a little bit too low. So turn that up to -1, -2/3, -1/3. I would say that -1 is pretty good, but you may need to test this. Again, this really depends on how far away you are from the subject. So you don't want the flash to be totally overpowering. You still want the person to come out very natural looking. So we use a slightly weaker flash. Go ahead and press set. Now, the last thing is when you're using the flash, sometimes the shutter speed will be consistently 1/60th of a second. And that is because the camera thinks that there is enough light and wants you to be able to hand hold that picture. So in order to make sure that we also expose for the background light, what you want to do, I'll quickly access the flash settings by pressing the flash button and then pressing menu. And here I can change my slow synchro setting. My slow synchro setting allows the camera to set a slower shutter speed while still using the flash. So I want this to be on. If in your case it's turned off, go ahead and turn that on and then press menu to escape. Go ahead and press the shutter button halfway to see what the shutter speed is set to. If the shutter speed is much less than 1/60th of a second, you may want to increase your ISO in order to increase the shutter speed. Because we are taking a picture of a person, you can't expect the person to be still for a full second exposure, so you want this to be something reasonable. If you are nearing a full second exposure, go ahead and turn the ISO dial, increasing the ISO. Press the shutter button halfway again, and as you can see now, I'm at 1/500th of a second. You won't be quite that high, but as long as it is nearing 1/8 of a second to 1/30th of a second, you should be okay. To find out much more about digital photography and your digital camera, go to lbguides.com.